Welcome, everybody. Let's start with opening prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us to this meeting. Please continue to be with us today and be with all the priests in this movement. Give us an understanding of the events happening today, and please continue to let us understand this message and be able to teach it to others. Love you. Thank you for first loving us. Amen.
Welcome, welcome everybody to Youth Prophecy Group meeting 129. We are the Flucuses. You're in the YPG meeting room, and today is February 4th of 2024.
The title of today's meeting is The Conflict Between Israel and Palestine. So, today we're going to look at the situation surrounding that area of the world. For decades, there has been conflict between the Jews and the Muslims. This conflict has often led to outbreaks of violence. So, in today's lesson, we will review the history of how this region came to look like it does, and then we will look at what happened there on October 7th and its aftermath.
Why the Jews migrated to Palestine? The Jews, or the Zionist movement, was a large-scale migration of Jews into Palestine that ultimately began the conflict that we see today. Roughly 200 years ago, over 99% of all the Jews in the world lived in Europe, with the remaining fraction of a percent living in Palestine. However, due to widespread anti-Semitism and persecution, the Jews decided that Europe was not an ideal place for them to live, and that they needed to relocate. The new location of choice was Palestine, the home of their Jewish ancestors. So in the 1800s, the first wave of immigration began, which became known as the Zionist movement. Then the second wave began in 1903. That's also when the first wave ended the same year. And the second wave ended in 1914. And after that, third and fourth waves came and took place, which brought hundreds of thousands of Jews from Europe into Palestine, many of whom were fleeing the Holocaust in the World War II. And this is, on the picture, we have a map of Europe, just the general location of Europe, and they moved to Palestine, which is at the tip of the arrow, kind of at the top of Saudi Arabia. So the only thing that stood in the Jews' way was the people who already occupied Palestine, the Arabs. Now, the Arabs didn't favor the influx of Jews into Palestine, and many of them were viewing it as a European colonization. It didn't take long for the hatred against Arabs or the hatred against Jews to turn into violence. In 1802, when an Arab was shot by a Jewish guard, over 200 Arabs attacked a Jewish settlement. This was only one of the first actions of violence against the two groups or between the two groups. And even though the Jews were able to split Palestine into two countries, Israel for the Jews and then the rest for the Arabs, violence, as we know, still continues today.
The history of Israel's conflict with Palestine dates back to the 1800s. In the late 1800s, persecution of Jews in Europe led to the formation of the Zionist movement in 1897, aiming to create a Jewish state in Palestine. As Jews moved in, tensions with Arabs escalated, especially during the British control after World War One. Britain's support for Zionist ambitions and the two-nation theory fueled violence, marked by events like the riots in 1921 and the Great Revolt in 1936. Despite casualties and unrest, Israel officially became a country on May 14, 1948, intensifying the conflict. Subsequent years saw massacres, occupation, United Nations directives, agreements, and continued hostilities, with Israel attacks on Gaza in 2008, 2012, and 2014, resulting in significant Palestinian conflicts. The complex and enduring conflict persists.
What is Hamas? Today, the biggest opponent to Israel in their area is Hamas, and that is an acronym for their full Arabic name, which translated means Islamic Resistance Movement. The group was formed in 1987 at the beginning of the first Palestinian uprising by a Palestinian refugee in Gaza or the Gaza Strip. Since then, it has grown to over 20,000 members. It is mainly located in the Gaza Strip, but it is also present in the West Bank and Palestinian refugee camps in other countries. Hamas is simply a Sunni Muslim group that has many roles, and it is sorry, it is the second biggest political party in the Palestinian territories, and it has controlled the Gaza Strip since 2007. There was an election in 2006, and Hamas won the majority of seats in the legislature. And then there was a bit of a conflict with the other big political party, and Hamas ended up being in control of Gaza. On the other hand, the other party is Fatah, and they are the ones in control of the West Bank. Israel has enforced a blockade since Hamas took over in Gaza, which has severely weakened their economy. Hamas has also a military side, and the whole group was designated a terrorist organization by the United States in 1997. The leaders of Hamas today are Sinwar, who is in Gaza, and Haniyeh, who is in exile. A poll from last summer shows that Palestinians don't like the fact that the Gaza Strip and the West Bank are not united, and more than half would actually vote to make Haniyeh the president over the current president in the West Bank. Hamas wants to destroy the country of Israel and instead form an Islamic Palestinian state. Hamas has also conducted many violent attacks to get closer to their goal, including suicide bombings, kidnappings, rocket launches, and cyber espionage. So the conflict between Israel and Hamas has been going on and off for decades and leading to our current situation.
October 7, 2023. On that day, Hamas launched what is called Operation Aqsa Flood. If that's an incorrect pronunciation, I only speak English. But anyway, this was a surprise terrorist attack against Israel's southern Gaza border. Over 8,000 rockets were launched against Israel, which was followed by 3,000 Hamas fighters invading Israel and attacking military sites and small villages or cities close to the border, the Gaza border. Over 1,000 Israelis were killed, most of them being civilians, and an additional 253 were taken hostage. I've also heard that it could have also been 240, but it's close to the same number. Hamas claimed that the attack was, quote, a necessary step towards, or sorry, quote, a necessary step and normal response to confront all Israeli conspiracies against the Palestinian people, end quote. Israel's government claimed that during the attack, Hamas committed war crimes such as torturing their victims. However, Hamas says they did not commit such crimes. This conflict has been the worst in recent history, and it doesn't show signs of being resolved anytime soon.
After Gaza's attack on Israel in early October, Israel had to retaliate. October 17, 2023, Israel attacked the largest hospital in Gaza. Gaza has been using it to shelter tens of thousands of displaced people along with it being a hospital. This bombing killed many people and injured some, including people who had been seeking shelter. Reports of the number of fatalities vary widely. The Gaza Health Ministry reported 342 injured and 471 killed, and so on. And the U.S. intelligence agency assessed the death toll between 100 and 300, end quote. And then 10 days after that, Israel began a ground strike against Gaza on the 27th of October and began to invade the country.
The effect that this conflict has had on women and children is deadly. Hamas is a conservative Sunni Muslim party, and they govern the Gaza Strip according to those values, which are called Sharia law. This means that women were at a disadvantage before the conflict even began. Of the Gaza Strip's approximately 2.3 million people, 1.9 million of those people have been displaced due to Israel's attacks, and around half of those are women and girls. In the past, men had been the majority of the conflicts of the casualties between Israel and Hamas, but now 70% of Palestinian deaths are women and children. The United Nations estimates that 2 mothers die every hour in Gaza. Violence from the war isn't the only thing that's threatening these people, it's also their lack of essentials like food and shelter and medical supplies. The Hamas soldiers are also assisting in the plight women are facing. On the October 7th attack, they went out of their way to assault and torture women before they killed them. Because of the scale of the attack, the chaos of the aftermath, and the Jewish custom of burying their dead quickly, we will never know the scale of Hamas's brutality. At least 60 women have been found dead with evidence that they were assaulted. That we know so far, there are four survivors, three women and one man, and they will probably never speak to the press. What little we do know comes from witnesses that hid or from people who found the bodies afterwards. And we cannot forget of all the women that Hamas is still holding captive. This conflict has led to a lot of suffering, and it is ample evidence that violence against women is being perpetrated from both sides.
Other countries in the conflict. The Israel-Palestine conflict involves more than those two countries. Many countries have taken sides on the issue, with a few being directly or indirectly involved. Qatar is one of these countries, and on the map, Qatar is the small green country. Qatar gained the favor of Hamas before or because of its actions in the past, such as when it accepted their exiled leaders. It has also not publicly stated that Hamas is wrong for the attacks, and it blames Israel for escalating the violence. Because of this, Hamas is sometimes willing to listen to Qatar, which has made the country a mediator in the conflict with Israel. Qatar has been able to negotiate the release of hostages Hamas has captured from Israel and negotiate the release of foreigners who are being trapped in Gaza, so they wouldn't be killed in the fight between two countries that they don't even live in. And that's among other accomplishments Qatar has been able to do. This hasn't been the only time that Qatar has been a middleman between countries in the Middle East. They were able to negotiate with opposing sides in other conflicts, and this has been able to increase their influence in the area. Another country involved in the conflict is Iran. And on the map, Iran is the green country. Sorry, Iran is the orange country. Qatar is the green, Iran's the orange. And unlike Qatar, Iran has directly chosen a side to support, and that side is Hamas. It's speculated that Iran was involved in the October 7th terrorist attack, although Iran denies this. What Iran can't deny is that it gives Hamas money and helps train its fighters. Leaders in Iran have congratulated Hamas for the violence against Israel. Iran's supreme leader has said, quote, "We kiss the hands of those who planned the attack on the Zionist regime. The Zionist regime's own actions are to blame for this disaster," end quote. Besides Iran and Qatar, other countries have spoken out on the conflict. such as Syria and Lebanon, who blame Israel for provoking the violence. Outside of the Middle East, the United States and Europe have sided with Israel and condemned Hamas. Russia and China have publicly taken a side, or they haven't publicly taken a side. They have not taken a side publicly, but however, they did support a ceasefire at the United Nations meeting recently.
People across the world want there to be a ceasefire between Israel and Gaza because so many civilians are being killed as simply collateral damage for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. There was previously a ceasefire in November, but that didn't last long. It only lasted 1 week. The problem is Gaza is holding Israelis captive and refuses to let them go into a ceasefire. Israel, on the other hand, refuses to agree to a ceasefire until all the captives are returned. The ones that are still alive because they keep accidentally killing. I remember it said reading somewhere that there's three captives got away and they were waving a white flag so that you could know that they needed help, and they were shot because they were thought they were enemy soldiers. So, however many captives are still alive because they keep killing them. Quoting from AP News. The U.S. and Arab mediators appear to be seeking a middle ground in which hostages will be released in stages over a 2 month period in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. More desperately needed humanitarian aid would be allowed into Gaza and Israeli forces would partially withdraw. End quote. In summary, so first we looked at the is Jews fleeing because of the Holocaust in World War II, which was why they were all. I have to go 1 second. So first we looked at the Jews all fleeing into Palestine because of World War II, and this created a conflict within Palestine, especially when Israel became a country. And I just combined two paragraphs, but that's fine. And the third paragraph, Hamas is a big opponent to Israel. They are a Sunni Muslim group, I believe you said. Sunni Muslim group, but they have many other roles, and they're also a political party or the second biggest political party. Next slide. Not that far. Yeah. They looked at the events on October 7, 2023.
You behind? Is this the slide? Okay.
It was a terrorist attack against Hamas, and they launched 8,000 rockets and 3,000 fighters. And Israel said they committed war crimes during this, but they did not. They did. So maybe they did, maybe they didn't. And then Israel retaliated by attacking a hospital in Gaza and then invaded the country 10 days later for both, I think. Yeah, it was 10 days between each. And the crimes against women and children in the country are a lot. Um, at least 2 mothers are killed every single day in Gaza. And that's not to include like all the problems that they face when they are alive, like where they're gonna live, because like when they bombed the hospital, people were taking shelter there, so now they no longer have shelter. And so it's just creating a lot of problems. And Israel and Gaza aren't the only two countries involved, so are other countries such as Qatar and Iran. So are other countries such as Qatar and Iran. Qatar is able to negotiate between the two countries, and Iran is in full support of the war crimes. Oh, every a mother is killed every 2 hours. Two every hour, not every 2 hours. 2 mothers are killed every hour. Yeah. And ceasefire, and countries, people are protesting across the world about having a ceasefire because of the war crimes that are happening there and all the people that are dying. And so far, there hasn't been one yet because the two countries want two different things before they agree to a ceasefire, which are in conflict with one another. But there's one being talked about, so we shall see if they have a ceasefire soon, hopefully. That's the end of the summary. Let's see.
So now, does anybody have any questions or comments about the lesson? Or about the message in general, not just the lesson? If not,
Okay, it is quiz time. 5 questions. Yes. Question number 1. Oh, next slide. Question number 1. What happened on October 7th, 2023? You can say it or type it in the chat, of course. We have 2 B's. Next, 3B. A D. Um, B is right. Hamas attacked Israel. There was a terrorist attack, as we saw. Over 1,000, like 1,200 people died that day, thanks to Hamas attacking Israel. We saw they attacked towns, military bases. One thing we didn't mention is they attacked a party, a rave to be specific. There was a lot of people there as well. Next. Question number 2. What country did we talk about that supported Hamas? C, we have an F, another F. Next. The answer is C. Iran, we saw, is providing Hamas with like money, training their soldiers, and all that stuff. Egypt isn't supporting Hamas. Hamas actually had tunnels dug from Gaza into Egypt. Egypt filled them up. So Egypt is not on Hamas's side at this point in time. Next. Why did the Jews first migrate to Palestine? G. Why did the Jews first migrate to Palestine? Another G, two more G's. Mm-hmm. G, and that's right, it's because of anti Semitism. The Jews in Europe were being persecuted very badly. This was in the 1800s, the early 1900s, and they started to leave. We saw that this became the Zionist movement, and some people still refer to Israel as Zionist, as we saw in the quote later in the lesson, was referring to Israel as Zionist. So, yes. Last, oh, someone just joined. Uh, oh, okay. Um, I'm going to do a quick review of the lesson because we were on the quiz. You know what? We have two more questions. I will just do a quick review for you. Finish the quiz first. Okay, I'll finish the quiz first and then we'll do the review. Okay, true or false? Israel Israel retaliated against Hamas's attack. True or false?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, repeat the question for me, please.
Oh, yes. True or false? Did Israel retaliate against Hamas's attack on October 7th? Or the attack was on October 7th. Did Israel retaliate after that? We have two H's, three H's,
H.
four H's, um, another H. Yes, that's true. Israel did retaliate. We saw on the 17th. They bombed the hospital and then they started the ground defense as well after that. Next and final question. Violence against women is not a major part of this conflict. True or false? A. Violence against women is not a major part. True or false? False. A. Okay, next we have three A's. And that's correct. False. Against Violence against women is not a major part of this conflict. That is false. It is a major part of this conflict. Congratulations, everybody. Thank you all for participating. Um, so we're going to do a quick review of the lesson because we have someone new. Could you go back to the summary, please?
Okay, so to summarize the lesson, I did the paragraph where we have the picture right here in the top left, and that is a picture of Europe and a little bit of and the Middle East. And we have that picture because starting in the 1880s, the Jews began to migrate from Europe into Palestine. And they did that because they were being persecuted in Europe because they were Jews, because anti-Semitism. Can you see the slide? You can't? Really?
No, I can't.
Just a second. Can you see it now? Okay. So top left,
Yes.
top left picture is Europe and Middle East. So yeah, the Jews were facing anti-Semitism in Europe in the 1880s, so they all started migrating into Palestine. They also continued to migrate because of the Holocaust and World War II. And in Palestine, the Arabs that lived there didn't like the Jews coming into where they lived. So that's eventually how the violence between Israel and Palestine started.
Okay. Sorry. And over time, it just got worse and worse, and the tension between the Jews and the Arabs escalated, and eventually violence broke out, and there was just little attacks after little attacks against each other, mentioned in after 5 dates. 2008, 2012, and 2014, and just continued to escalate from there.
We next looked at Hamas, which is basically what Israel is fighting right now. Hamas is a Sunni Muslim group. They were designated a terrorist organization by the U.S. in 1997. They were formed in 1980. 1980. 87. So 10 years later, they were formed in 1987. Like I said, they are Sunni, so they are rather conservative. They are control. They are in control of Gaza. They have been in control since 2007, and they are technically a political party, but they also have army, so that's also why they're a terrorist group. And they have been attacking Israel, and they want Israel basically to be destroyed and to make a Islamic Palestinian state.
Next in the lesson, we talked about the October 7th terrorist attack, which happened last year. And on that day, the Hamas terrorist group, they performed a terrorist attack on the border of Gaza and Israel, but they were attacking Israel. And they blew up military bases and they blew up communities, cities, like we see in this picture. And lots of people were killed. And additionally, Hamas took Israelis captive.
So then Israel retaliated by bombing a hospital, and the hospital was being used as a shelter for people because of all their homes had been destroyed, and a lot of people were killed in that. And then they also invaded Gaza right after that.
During this whole attack, violence against women has been a very prominent feature on Israel's side. There, like when they bombed the hospital, they killed a lot of women. They're actually 70% of the casualties in Palestine are women and children now. And women are not only are they being killed, but they also have like shelter and food and all of that stuff. On Hamas's side, when they attacked Israel, they basically assaulted and tortured like any woman they came across. They literally went out of their way to do that instead of just killing them. And we know even with the captives that it's bad with them as well. So it's basically either whatever country you're in to be to be a woman or even a child, it's a very, very dangerous time.
And in this conflict, there are also other countries who are involved. Like on the bottom right picture, the small green country is the country of Qatar. And Qatar has been a mediator between Iran and Hamas during the conflict. Like they organized the release of some hostages and the release of foreigners who were in the country when the violence started. And they also have been trying to organize a ceasefire and that kind of thing. And the yellow or the orange country, Iran, has been directly involved in supporting Hamas in the war. Iran has been funding the Hamas military and training their fighters so they can continue to fight against Israel. And also other countries like Lebanon and Syria, they don't directly like fund Hamas, but they do say Israel is mainly responsible for the violence. And Western countries like the United States and its European allies are against Hamas and they support Israel. And countries like China and Russia, while they don't directly take a side, they did support a ceasefire.
Well, a ceasefire is being talked about now, but both countries want two different things before they agree to a ceasefire. So we'll see if they do come to a ceasefire. Obviously, for everyone's benefit, it would be good if they do, but both countries are being stubborn and just won't agree to a ceasefire.
Okay, so thank you everybody for coming. If you have notes or if you want notes, if you have questions about any of our lessons or the message in general, or if you want updates or recordings about our videos and lessons, you can contact us at youthprophecygroup@gmail.com. And the next lesson will be on the first Sunday in March, which is March 3rd. Let's close in prayer, sorry. Dear Lord, thank you for giving us the opportunity to learn about the events currently happening. And thank you for giving us all of the fruits of the Spirit and the Holy Spirit. And thank you for letting us be part of the 144,000 and bringing a new earth where there won't be any wars or violence and there'll just be peace. And continue to give us more of an understanding of the current events so we can know which side to be on and which side is politically correct. Even though they're both fighting, but yeah, at least we don't side with the terrorists. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for coming.